Welcome to the district. I'm your Fulton County Commissioner of District 4, Natalie Hall. The district is the place to keep you informed, updated, and inspired regarding everything Fulton County District 4. Immediately following this break, we will have the pleasure of hearing from CJ and Kelli Stewart, the founder and co-founder of the L.E.A.D Center for Youth. L.E.A.D stands for Launch, Expose, Advise, and Direct. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back. Welcome back to the district. I'm your Fulton County Commissioner of District 4, Natalie Hall. Joining us today are CJ and Kelli Stewart, the founder and co-founder of the L.E.A.D Center for Youth. L.E.A.D stands for Launch, Expose, Advise, and Direct. CJ is an Atlanta native who grew up in the most dangerous apartment complexes, such as Hollywood Brooks, located on Hollywood Road. He was known for being an outstanding Chicago Cub outfielder and is now known for being one of the top baseball player development professionals in the country. He has over 22 years of experience in the player development industry. He and his lovely wife, Kelli Stewart, started an inner city youth nonprofit organization called L.E.A.D. Kelli grew up outside of Athens, Georgia. She graduated from Cedar Shoals High School and went on to complete her undergraduate studies from Kennesaw State University and obtain her bachelor's degree from Cole College. Kelli has always been involved with sports-based youth development. Together, CJ and Kelli married their passions for baseball and the youth to start Diamond Directors and L.E.A.D. Diamond Directors is the Stewart's sports-based training and development organization that trains some of the country's top amateur and professional baseball athletes. Jason Hayward from the Cubs, Dexter Fowler, Chicago Cubs World Series champion, and Tyler Flowers from the Braves are just a few notable professional clients. L.E.A.D is a sports-based youth development organization whose mission is to empower an at-risk generation to lead and transform their city of Atlanta by using the sport of baseball to teach African-American boys how to overcome three curveballs that threaten their success: crime, poverty, and racism. CJ and Kelli, how are you doing today?
Doing awesome. How about yourself?
Great to be.
Great, great. I'm so happy to have you on the show today. So tell us, how did this all begin? Where did it all start?
So I was born and raised here in Atlanta. Was born April 10th, 1976, at Grady Hospital. My mother, Bertha Gail Moss, and my dad, Willie James Stewart, came together to have me. My mom was 16 years old. My dad was much older, the age of 25, and nonetheless, I mean, they were together and brought me into the world, bringing me into the world. Though we lived off of on Hollywood Road in Hollywood Brooks apartments, which the blessing was to have a place to stay and live. But we lived in a place that was pretty much relegated for African-American families like ours that did not have a lot of financial means, nor come from a family that has a legacy of financial means. So with that said, I mean, we were, as a family, put in a position where we had to work really hard. Years later, as my family continued to improve their lives and move to the working class and later on middle class, it was a lot of trauma that was in the house. And the thing that gave me the most peace was baseball. And being a student in Atlanta Public Schools and also a product of Atlanta Parks and Recreation, I went to the field every day dreaming of playing professional baseball. And one day growing up to be something between or both Martin Luther King Jr. and Jackie Robinson. So a lot of what we do now is inspired by the life that I've lived.
That's awesome. And so how did L.E.A.D begin?
So when my professional baseball career was over, I was trying to figure out what I was going to do in my life. I mean, I knew that if I went and found a good job, one with benefits, then I would have some happiness. But I didn't know what I really needed to do to have joy. And even in knowing what I wanted to do to bring me joy, which is unconditional love, and for what the work that I do, I wanted to be a coach, but that wasn't a very popular job, especially for me as a child growing up. If you're an African American man and you weren't a doctor, lawyer, engineer, or educator, then you weren't really considered valuable. And so things like sports was just kind of relegated for people to do as recreation. So in the back of my mind, I wanted to be a coach. But then when my career was over, I went back to the place Sportsorama in Marietta, where I did some training myself when I was as I was an athlete at the time. Went back there, they hired me, they let me do coaching. I was able to get really good really fast because I had an opportunity to work with a lot of kids. Years went by, 10 years into me being a professional coach. One of my clients, Stan Conway, a very wealthy real estate developer, and he also is a white man. I was working with his middle school age white son, and Stan told me three things that changed my life and put me on a trajectory towards starting L.E.A.D. And he said, number one, if you were as good as you said you was, CJ, your rates wouldn't be so low. So I was working and developing a lot of really good high level athletes, but I was competing with my competitors based on cost. So some days I would probably do it for free just so I can have more clients. So that's not a good sustainable business model. Then secondly, he said, if I was as good as I said I was, it wouldn't be so easy for people to get access to me. And then lastly, he told me there's a decline of Blacks in baseball, and was trying to figure out why I wasn't doing anything about it. And that moment caused a lot of sleepless nights. And then it was the thing that brought me to my calling, which is to be a coach, but I didn't know how to tangibly do it. So I just brought Kelli into the dream in order to make it a reality.
Yes, and so tell us the story behind how Kelli, how do you connect into all of this? And what are your beginnings?
So I was born here in Atlanta. Not a Grady baby. I was born at Georgia Baptist, but born into the same family, socioeconomic situation as CJ. My parents divorced when I was around 5 years old. So I had the great pleasure, I call it. I know when a child is from a broken home, it is definitely a tough thing, but I always tell my mom I got the best part of the deal because I got to go live with my grandmother. And she lived on a small farm in Oglethorpe County. So I grew up as a country girl. I have planted, okra, tomato, watermelon, you name it. I know how to farm a little bit. I don't know if I remember exactly, but it's somewhere in there. But I moved back to Atlanta when I graduated from high school. Didn't really know what I was going to do with my life. Really wasn't even supposed to graduate from high school just due to some struggles that I had in my own family, and ended up at Georgia State University. And I was working at South DeKalb Mall at the time, and was just on my way home from work, right off of Glenwood. I was living with my aunt, going to Georgia State, and this car kept following me. And so I'm trying to figure out what's going on. I'm back to the city, new to the city. I'm like, okay, so I'm gonna die on I-20 by a stalker. And
So it was September 7th, 1996, and I was about 8 days away from reporting to winter camp while I was playing with Chicago Cubs. My mom and dad, I was living with them, and they wanted me to drive to Atlanta to pick up my sister. So while I'm driving, and I'm using all kind of profanities while I was driving because it was late and I just didn't want to do it. But while I'm driving, I see Kelli, had no idea who she was. But in my mind, even as a child, like I had an idea of what I wanted my future wife to look like, all the way from skin tone, body type, everything. So when I saw her, it was just, I was nervous. I was scared to do it, but in the back of my mind, I'm seeing my future in this car. So I just decided to follow her and got a phone number, and that was September 7th, 96. We were married November 23rd, 97, and we'll be celebrating 25 years of marriage this in November 23rd of 2022.
Oh my goodness. Okay, I didn't know I was going to hear a love story along
Yeah.
with saving the children. This is awesome.
Well, that's how, because I think that's important, because it's like, we have to understand the role that divine intervention plays in our life. And that happened to me at a time where I was not very close to God because of a lot of things that were happening in my life. But as I look back in retrospect, I know that it was God, because first of all, I'm terrified to even pull over for anybody. And I pulled over at the gas station that was well lit, let me say that. But had I just kept going or ignored him, we all would not be here talking today.
Yes.
So when he came home after that convicting moment with Stan, and he was just like, we got to put something together. He wants us to put a budget together. And it just started off as a summer program. And when we put the budget together, I was like, this is way too much money. I was like, this man is not going to give us all this money. Like, he is not going to put this money in our hands. Specifically, I said, this white man is not going to give us this money. And not only did he entrust us with the money that we budgeted for, he actually gave us a seed of $60,000, which is more than we budgeted for. And we started out with 18 families in the summer of 2007. And we've grown that to a $1.2 million organization. And we serve 250 boys, 6th through 12th grade in Atlanta public schools annually. And just from so much support from the community, from supporters like you, Commissioner Hall, and donors, funders, we've been able to grow our organization and impact a whole lot of lives.
Oh, I'm loving this story. So you have to tell us a little bit more, like, what is sports-based youth development?
Okay, so I can get kind of on a tangent on this. I can get real cerebral about this because I'm really passionate about it. So just put up a sign or something when you want me to stop. But sports-based youth development, or SBYD, is sport for social good. So it's not just sport for the sake of competition. It's not just sport for the sake of winning, although those are pieces of the focus. But SBYD focuses on how we can use sport to address children who are growing up in issues of trauma, who experience high levels of trauma. It focuses on how can we use sport as an incubator for SEL development, because sports is such a great incubator for social emotional learning development, because it's an active, fun, kinesthetic activity. And so with SBYD, it focuses on removing those barriers to movement, removing those barriers to sport. When families who come from low-income households, children who come from low-income households, their families' number 2 barriers to accessing these programs is cost and transportation. And so in an SBYD format, we remove those barriers versus a travel program where it's going to cost at least $4,000 or $5,000 just to even participate in the program. So SBYD is a godsend to what our youth need now, especially trying to come out of the effects of the pandemic.
That's so important as well too, because when Kelli speaks of the social emotional learning capacities, one of them that really helped me a lot in my life is social skills. And so being able to develop and maintain healthy relationships, because even for me as a kid, I was introduced to baseball with my grandfather and fell in love with the Chicago Cubs. And when TJ Wilson, the late TJ Wilson, who's the Atlanta Police Department officer, when he came over to Westlake High School, the high school that I graduated from, and he was talking to me about baseball, I was able to respond with confidence. And then he provided the access that I needed Also, too, as a child, I grew up playing at Cascade Youth Organization. And my very first coach was Emmett Johnson, who at the time was the Atlanta Public Schools Board of Education chairman. And then also Joshua Butler, who was a very famous art teacher that a lot of folks know about at the Mays High School community. So even though my family was financially poor, I was able to make up for those deficits with influential African Americans that were in the community that just so happened to have been my coach. So the same thing applies even for us, is as we serve families that are living in very hard financial times, L.E.A.D goes the next level beyond coaching, and then making sure that we also are able to advocate. We go to another level beyond just mentoring and making sure that we can also sponsor, not just with money, but also with relationships.
It sounds like you're dealing with a lot of young people who have experienced trauma. And
Mhm.
so tell us, why is having a trauma-informed approach to youth development important?
I really don't feel like we give enough focus on this. We say trauma informed, and a lot of times terms and words become buzzwords. But as we have trained ourselves and our staff, we understand that prolonged exposure to trauma that is unbuffered and unmitigated actually rewires the way your brain thinks. And so when you have a child who is growing up in an environment, quite frankly, growing up with parents who have also most likely been exposed to a lot of trauma growing up. I know that was the case in my family, just generationally trauma that we've had to deal with. It rewires the way you think. It physically rewires your brain. So your response to anything that comes into your way is that it's a threat that has to be eliminated. We talk about the tragic incident where a gentleman came into the subway and killed a worker because of too much mayo on his sandwich. So we have to believe that it wasn't about the mayo. Like, what was going on in his thought processes that would not just make him say, you know what, that's just a little bit too much mayo for me. Can you redo that? But what we have to understand when we're in youth development, we have to start asking these questions earlier on. You know, how is this continuous exposure to traumatic events reshaping and rewiring the brains of our youth? Because we grow up without having the right skills to cope with conflict, without having the right skills to understand how to express ourselves when things aren't going the way that we want them to go. And instead of having the language to express that, it comes out in something physical.
And speaking of the language, the question that going through the training or to deal with trauma, the question is, what has happened to you before? Why did you do that? So a lot of times when a young person is acting out in a very bad way, sometimes even to the point where it's violent, it is, why did you do that? But if you have a trauma informed approach to it, even while the young man is going through the process of coming into the program, you start to get the information that you need to understand what has happened to you, so that the organization can also understand if we have the capacity to properly serve you. Because if the trauma that he is dealing with goes beyond us, our love and prayers isn't going to be enough. We're just quite frankly going to increase the likelihood of that person doing harm to themselves and others.
I love that. I love how you said you approach it from the standpoint of what has happened to you instead of why did you do that? Because I think when, especially with young people, when you approach them and you say, why did you do that? It immediately makes them withdraw.
Mhm.
And I believe that it makes them close up instead of open up to you. And so I love that you say, what has happened to you? You look at it from a different lens, because you know that they may be acting from a traumatic situation, from something that happened to them before. And this is the response that they're used to giving in a certain type of environment or situation, and it helps you deal with them from a different standpoint of actually like love and care, because you care enough to even know what happened to them.
Right, right. And we have a saying in this space of SBYD that a dysregulated adult cannot regulate a dysregulated child. So even from the standpoint of helping to make sure that our youth understand how to regulate themselves, we as adults also need that training to understand how to regulate ourselves, because as I just shared, I have come from a background of generational trauma. African Americans in this country as a shared race and a shared experience have come from generational trauma from a racial standpoint, but also within our own families. So we have to be able to be real about that. And I think when we share that with our youth, it draws them closer to us, because we're willing to show them our flaws and not try to present ourselves as perfect, and help them understand that we're both works in progress on this journey. We as the adults are a little farther along than you, but we're still working to be the best version of ourselves.
And I just want to add to that too, because that's so important, because a lot of times dysregulated boys that are experiencing high levels of frequent trauma without a buffer, they are asked to live at a standard of regulated Black boys. Black boys oftentimes that come from middle-class households, where there's a lot of support. And so with those two distinctions, dysregulated and regulated, we got to make sure that we deal with those distinctions so that we can be realistic about what is needed for boys to succeed. So for us, we are intentionally scouting out dysregulated boys and explaining that, so that when we walk into a room, they're not looking around saying, oh, this is all the bad kids. No, you're dealing with a lot of trauma. I still have to work on trauma that I've gone through, and I have to have that support. And then once we can name it and then focus on serving them accordingly, then the things that they've achieved, and we got several examples of achievement, then the things that they've achieved can be done because we're properly resourcing them.
Oh, yes. Well, CJ and Kelli, thank you. Let us take a break. And when we return, we will continue our discussion with CJ and Kelli Stewart. You don't want to miss it. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the district. I'm your Fulton County Commissioner of District 4, Natalie Hall. If you are just joining us, we have the pleasure of speaking with CJ and Kelli Stewart, founder and co-founder of the L.E.A.D Center for Youth. CJ and Kelli, thank you again for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
What frustrates the both of you the most in your roles as nonprofit leaders?
One of the things that frustrates me, well, a couple of things, is how Black-led nonprofits are severely underfunded, when you put them up against nonprofits that are white-led. What it says to me is that the funding community historically doesn't believe that we can have solutions to our own problems and that our leaders can lead effectively. Now, after the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, a lot of folks in different sectors have taken a step back to look at how they've done business as usual over the years, and the funding community is one of those sectors. And we've entered into this space of what we call trust-based philanthropy, where they're looking at some of the processes and the way things have been done that have excluded Black and BIPOC populations from access to funding. So I think that tide is turning. Unfortunately, it took the murders of some of our dear brothers and sisters in our communities for that to turn. But when I walk into a room, it's not lost on me that I have to climb that hill and fight that battle as a leader of a nonprofit, being a Black woman. Also, what frustrates me is the low expectations that a lot of people have for our youth. We have a goal of our boys, developing our boys into major league citizens. What does that look like? That looks like you, Commissioner Hall. That looks like all of us on this call. And so if anyone in our organization from the board on down does not believe that one of our boys coming into our organization can actually hold your position, then they don't need to be with us, because we set the standard high because we believe in them.
I would say,
see you, CJ. You look like you were leaning up. You have something to say.
yeah, I mean, and a lot of what frustrates me is just even things that I've personally dealt with and overcome. So what frustrates me is as a coach, I feel like more times than not, I'm asked, even whether it's through words or actions, to go above and beyond the call to coach, as opposed to a white coach. So I feel like for Black boys, when I was a boy, when we lack self-confidence, then the solution is white is right. Then the quick thing is let me go find a white coach. And that's even what I did for me. I got to a certain point where in high school, I just stopped believing in the Black men that developed me, because I just did not believe that they would be able to go out and advocate for me so that I can go to college and play at the professional level. And I lived with that for many, many years. And it even went through my adulthood, even when it came down to seeking mentors. A lot of times I would have relationships with Black men that would build me up, just to prepare me for a white man to take me the rest of the way. And so I am now cured of that. I had an experience while being in Leadership Atlanta in the 2015 class that just really rocked my world. And since then, I have been showing up openly Black and proud of it every day since then. And so it does frustrate me, but it's worth it when I have to get a young Black boy that I'm having to convince that we can lead you, not only as a Black-led organization, but an organization that's led by a Black woman, and just making sure we don't have to do any more than a white coach would have to do.
Well, I do want to say this as it relates to funding to minority and women and small nonprofit organizations. One thing that I learned over the years is that everybody is doing their own thing, and many people are so entrenched in doing their own thing that they're working in silos. So it's unfortunate because they may not know about everybody else that's out there doing great things, and everybody else that has opportunities available. And so I made it my business that whenever I met new minority women and small nonprofit organizations such as yours, that I inform every nonprofit organization about the grant opportunities here at Fulton County, from our community service program grants to our contract for services, arts and culture grants, because I know that everybody's not going to have that information. And I can honestly say with great pride that most recently, in reviewing the list of the nonprofits and individual artists and those who have applied for grant funding, that I've seen a significant increase in minority, women, and small nonprofit organizations receiving grant funding from Fulton County, because they are literally applying, which is something they had never done before. And so I think in order to combat some of this, it's just all about reaching out, communicating, getting into those spaces that you don't normally go. If you're not involved in the Black community, you're not going to know what's in the Black community. So we can't fault people for what they don't know. So we have to talk about these things. Many times when I talk to the larger nonprofit organizations, I speak on some of the smaller nonprofit organizations, some of the African American and women-based nonprofit organizations, to let them know, hey, did you know that there were these other organizations out here? And many of them, of course, say, no, I didn't know. How can we get involved? How can we work together? And that's what we need to do. We have to collaborate more, and we have to stop working in those silos. So I'm so happy to have you guys here. And I want to know, what gives you the most hope in your role as nonprofit leaders?
You know, we've had a lot of success. I think about one of our lead ambassador alums, Austin Evans. He graduated from New Schools at Carver, and then went on to Texas A&M University. He graduated there with his bachelor's, and then he graduated with his master's, and was the commencement speaker for his graduations for his master's. And even during the time when he was at Texas A&M for the first 3 years, he served as the off-campus senator there and passed the bill to erect a statue of the first African-American graduate from Texas A&M. So that's just one powerful example, and we have several others, but I feel hopeful. And when I think about hope, I'm thinking about a reality that I can't even tangibly see, and that I may never see, but making sure that we are doing things, planting seeds in young people today that will get us there.
I think for me, it's when I see that our boys realize their value. That's so important. And that's the important first step that we make with them, because when you start to see your value, you begin to make different decisions about your life. You begin to make different decisions about who you hang with, what fills up your free time, how dedicated you are in school, because when you recognize that value, it propels you to start looking at the future and then to start planning, which is a lot of what our boys don't have. I mean, growing up in poverty, I know from my own experience, you don't really plan much for the future because you don't even feel like there's going to be one for you, or you feel like the things that you want are so out of reach that you don't even plan for them. So when our boys start to see their value, and I know that because they start manifesting it in making better decisions for their lives, like then I know we got some fertile ground to grow and build on.
Yes. So, I was thinking about how the uniqueness of your organization is that you utilize baseball to help these youth. So tell us, how does baseball fit into the African American culture as a whole?
Okay, now CJ is getting ready to give y'all a whole history lesson. This is his groove. This is his space.
Oh,
I'll definitely keep it brief, but the fact, I mean, baseball is Black culture, and oh my God, it's so.
I know. I told you.
But it's like, I'll just take for instance, the Negro Leagues was a place where boys became men. Like you learn how to become a man through that. The Negro Leagues and the churches got together to make sure that they were working together to strengthen the Black community. So at a time when church attendance was really, really low, as well as baseball, they decided to come together. And so that's when lights were erected for the first time at baseball games. So when you go to a Braves game and you see them play at night, that was invented in the Negro Leagues. So what happened as a result of that, it was, you go to church in the daytime, you get out of church and you eat, and then you go to the baseball field for the baseball game. And so that was a full day of family. So it's so much more, but that's just a very strong example of that. And even if you are a child right now and you don't know that history, if you ask enough questions of your grandparents or your great-grandparents, there's going to be mention of baseball being played in the community. So it's who we are.
Wow. So, Kelli, what role did African American women play in the foundation of baseball?
So as I learned from CJ, there was an owner in the Negro Leagues named Effa Manley, and she was actually the owner. What team was it? I can't remember.
Gosh, it's really
I know it. We'll think of it. But she was the owner of a team, and she actually had a player in the league who was considered a lot more athletic and a lot more talented, Monty Irvin, than Jackie Robinson was. But when the scouts and the owners from, what was it called, in the National League?
The Dodgers, it was Branch Rickey.
So the Dodgers came looking, she would not let Monty Irvin go for cheap. And that's why we know Jackie Robinson and we don't know Monty Irvin, because Effa Manley was there protecting him and protecting his value, and is saying, okay, we got a great thing going on over here in the Negro Leagues, and here come the white owners, in the Major League Baseball trying to come and take what we got. Well, if you're gonna come and take it, you're gonna have to pay for it. And so she protected her players in that way. And I see Effa Manley's all throughout my life growing up as, Black women who protected the community, starting with my own grandmother.
It was the Newark Eagles.
Yes.
She owned the Newark Eagles.
Oh, okay. So what role did baseball play in shaping the city of Atlanta?
So, a lot of people know about Atlanta and the mantra, a city being too busy to hate. And so under Ivan Allen as the mayor, him coming up with that mantra was very important, because a lot of the surrounding cities were coming up with their own mantras. And what they were trying to do is they were trying to win the race to the future. That future would include the world's busiest airport. That future would include headquarters of Fortune 100, 500 companies. And so when you look at who won that race to the future, it was Atlanta. If you go into Tallahassee, Tallahassee does not look like Atlanta. Birmingham doesn't look like an Atlanta. And the reason why is because when the Milwaukee Braves came to Atlanta in 1966, we became the first major league sports team in the South, sports team of any type, the Atlanta Braves. That was so important because of Jim Crow laws. Jim Crow laws prevented Black people and white people from being together. And one of the main conditions that had to be met in order for the deal to be executed, Hank Aaron, who at the time was the best baseball player in Major League Baseball, and he was with the Milwaukee Braves, he had to be allowed to live anywhere in the city of Atlanta that he wanted to. He chose to live in Southwest Atlanta, but if he wanted to live in an all-white community, he could have. And Hank Aaron, as amazing as he was and all the things that he didn't graduate from high school. And Hank Aaron was blessed to have an amazing family. He had an amazing support system. He had a God-given ability to hit a ball that allowed laws to be changed. And, and then you have individuals like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who also was amazing, but Dr. King wasn't allowed, Jim Crow laws didn't allow him to live where he wanted to. So the irony of that is, here's also an African-American man who did not graduate from high school, didn't graduate from college, but he was able to contribute. And he was able to work alongside Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So that's just a piece of history that a lot of people don't know and should know, because Atlanta does not become a world-class Olympic city if the Milwaukee Braves don't come to Atlanta with the top Major League Baseball player who happened to have been an African-American man in Hank Aaron.
Amazing. So what's next for L.E.A.D? Because you guys are awesome and the work you're doing is changing so many lives. So what is next?
So what's next is expansion. We are looking to expand our facilities at the L.E.A.D Center of Youth to go from 5,500 square feet to 11,000 square feet. So to double our facilities. So that means we can serve more youth. In the next year or two, we will be launching our girls program, our lady ambassadors. And the sport that we will have, of course, will be tennis. Most people who know us know that our two daughters play tennis. One is at Southern University right now, finishing up senior year on the tennis team. And so tennis has been so near and dear to the growth and the maturation of our girls, just teaching them how to have that confidence, how to be on the court and call your own lines. And when somebody's cheating you, how to stand up, for your calls. And so that's one of the exciting things that's next for us as well.
That's awesome. So, how can people find out more about LEAD and all these great things that you're currently doing and the new things that you're going to be doing? And just how can they contact you?
So please go to leadcenterforyouth.org, L.E.A.D centerforyouth.org, and you can reach us there online. Our contact information is there. You can also find all of our social media handles there. So please follow us on all those social media networks and get involved. I mean, we have a lot going on all year round. We're not just a baseball season program. We are a year-round sport-based youth development organization, and there's lots of work to do.
And you can't have fun without funding. So we definitely welcome the support.
Well, thank you, CJ and Kelli, for taking the time to share all this great information with us, your story, and the work that you're doing with our youth. And when we return, I will share my closing thoughts. Welcome back to the district. I'm your Fulton County Commissioner of District 4, Natalie Hall. It was a pleasure to have CJ and Kelli Stewart, the founder and co-founder of LEAD Center for Youth, on the district show today. LEAD stands for Launch, Expose, Advise, and Direct. LEAD is a sports-based youth development organization whose mission is to empower an at-risk generation to lead and transform their city of Atlanta by using the sport of baseball to teach African American boys how to overcome 3 curveballs that threaten their success: crime, poverty, and racism. What makes LEAD special is their programming on 4 pillars: athletics, academics, civic engagement, and commerce. LEAD is a year-round program built by this dynamic duo that the youth are able to use as a framework for life. 100% of their youth graduate from high school, 91% go to college, 90% get college scholarships, and 14% enter into the military. We discussed with the Stewarts the importance of youth mentorship, the importance of sports-based youth development, and the long-standing cultural impacts baseball has had on the African American community. CJ and Kelli Stewart are doing what many would say is hard work, but I call it heart work. Our youth are our future leaders, and we must provide them with every resource and tool to help them be successful. They need to know that it doesn't matter how they grew up or where they grew up, they can still be successful in life. That's our show for today. Please follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at FulCoD4. That's FULCOD and the number 4. I'm your Fulton County Commissioner, Natalie Hall, and thank you for watching the district.